Hi, I'm Mark from Property Ventures. Welcome to this week's New Zealand Property Podcast, where we interview the property expert around New Zealand.
Hello once again. Today we talk to Philip Macalister from the Property Investor magazine and landlords.co.nz website. You'll find out that there is much more than meets the eye with Philip and the magazine. He shares information about this and other sites available, the property market around the country, and investing tips. I'm sure you'll enjoy this two-part podcast series. Hello and welcome to the show, Philip.
Hi, Mark. And thank you for having me on your show. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I think I am, and I'm sure our investors will too. There's probably more to meets the eye with the Property Investor magazine and yourself. So tell us a bit about yourself, Philip, and who you are, what your history is, and how through investing, and how about you come to be the editor of the PEI magazine.
Oh, look, it's one of those classic stories of, a small business which started, as a one-man band from a garage in Lake Tarawera and built up into what is now, the biggest specialist personal finance publishing business in New Zealand. We do, besides the New Zealand Property Investor magazine, we run two other magazines which are trade titles, one's for mortgage brokers and the other for investment advisors. And we run a whole bunch of websites as well, which are all focused around personal investment. It's also one of those classic stories because, for many years I didn't know what I wanted to do. And, I'd done plenty of other things previously, including, sailing professionally in the States and racing yachts. And that seems like a long time ago now, but this publishing business and personal finance and property is certainly a passion now.
Great stuff here, and obviously it is if you've built up to those sorts of magazines, and I think we'll talk a bit more about maybe the mortgage broker and the investment advisors part of it afterwards, even though the main conversation today will be about the Property Investor magazine, but obviously that flows on to other bits and pieces.
Definitely, yep.
So on the Property Investor magazines, you sort of said about the other two there. What other involvements do you currently have, and how does that help produce a great article we have every month with the Property Investor magazine in New Zealand?
It sort of comes back to my philosophy around investing, and it's whether it's in your business or in your personal life, and that's that I believe you have to have diversification in what you do. So in terms of our publishing business we run, we try to diversify it so we cover everything. So it's property investing, it's financial planning and managed funds and KiwiSaver. We do a lot of work around mortgages and home loans and life insurance as well, and that diversification helps us through the tough times, and because none of the businesses will all go gangbusters at once. Some will be good, some will be bad, and so have that diversification is important, but it's also plays out in a mirror image, I think, in terms of one's, personal finances as well. My view is, in terms of wealth creation, is that property is a really important part to it, but you also have to have other pieces to the puzzle as well. One of those is running your own business, and I think having a business which you can build value in is an important part of building up your wealth and preparing for retirement. But also you have to have things like shares and managed funds, and in terms of the managed funds space, that's very much KiwiSaver these days. So it's something which, I personally believe you have to have, on a personal level, plus at a business level, and it's something which, has worked for us.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting you sort of spoke about yourself or as the magazines through the diversity of the different magazines, and just there, and other people don't throw all their eggs in one basket, and that's probably something I never even realised many years ago when I started the property thing. There's a whole lot of equations, and there's different ways of at building your portfolio, and as you said, there's not everything's going to be perfect all the time, so the more fingers in the pie you have as such, as long as it's controlled, you have more options.
Oh, absolutely. And, one of the things which is fantastic about property, and one of the things I really love about property, is that it is an investment that you can actually have control over. So you can decide what you want to buy and what you want to sell, but it's one of the only investments or asset classes that you have where you can actually add value yourself, and that might be doing subdivisions or doing renovations or adding another room and things like that. And property is also fascinating because there's so many different strategies you can use as an investor, and to me, a good property investor is someone who has a really clear strategy of what they want to do, having a clear, checklist, and actually following their strategy, and that's critical. With a lot of these other investments you have, like KiwiSaver and shares and stuff, you buy them. There's nothing you can do to add value, etc. You need to have a strategy, but it's not as hands-on, and it's not as in some ways, it's not as enjoyable. Property, I think, gives you a whole realm of other aspects you can do, which makes it really exciting.
Absolutely, it gives you that bit of extra interest, I suppose. And as you said, it is a different strategy of the other ways that you said, shares or what have you have no control over it. And sitting with property, whether it's good or bad, or with the market and watching the market, you certainly have a lot of options, and that's, I think, why it becomes a passion for people, I guess.
Oh, look, and you're absolutely right. And the good property investors, they are passionate, they are professional, and they do have a plan. They go out there and they decide, where they're going to buy, what sorts of properties they buy, and you see the success. I mean, over the years, one of the things we do in the magazine is we always run a profile of an investor and hear their story. So it actually makes property investing a little bit more personal. But I've always been fascinated how you come across people who, do have these very clear strategies and they stick to them. I mean, they might look at 40 or 50 properties until they find one which actually fits all their criteria, which they think that are the criteria they need to add value and be successful. And so having that patience in terms of doing it is quite important.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been a bit of a common theme through the podcast, is the clear goals and strategies, and you bring the nail on the head there. The successful people around have that, and they stick to it. And patience is an amazing tool. Any errors I've made in the past have generally come from not being patient. So it's something really to stick by. And if you have those strategies and goals, you will be patient, because you will wait till that one comes up that fits your strategy.
And look, most of New Zealand, I think Auckland and Christchurch are different, but most of the places you buy property in New Zealand, they're not get-rich-quick areas. They're actually long-term investments, and we've seen through the surveys we've done of investors that most people, it is buy and hold. They buy it for the long term. They're not speculators. They're not really, capital gain is part of the criteria, but a lot of it is around income and, gradually paying down the debt in their portfolio. And so they actually end up with an income stream which can support them in retirement. And that's actually, that's a sensible, and it's a sensible strategy, but it's also not a high risk strategy. I think, sure, places like Auckland and Christchurch, there's, you do see some people trying to play a get rich quick approach, but to me that will often lead to failure, and it runs a lot more risk, and the risk of failure is far greater, and we've seen that if the market turns quickly, like it did at the end of the last cycle, people can get hammered big time.
Yeah, definitely right there, and that's been a theme I've pushed again in the recent sort of podcast. I go to the local PIA meetings as I am tonight, and the ones who've done well, they've been around for several years. Times the healer, they've just accumulated property, held, never sold, and some very wealthy, quiet people around that don't brag about what they've done.
Oh, look, and that's absolutely right again. But also, properties are another fascinating aspect of property, and one which I really love is it's such a wide cross section of the community. I remember when I first started going to PIA meetings, and there's one I remember in Hamilton in particular where Bob Jones spoke. There was a huge audience, and you had everyone from the blue collar workers right through to the professionals, and they're all there. And the thing which ties property investors together, and a point I often make to the media, is that these people who invest in property, they're there for one reason. It's that they're prepared to get off their butts and do something and prepare for their retirement. They're not going to sit around and hope that the government pays them a pension in retirement. They don't necessarily like some of the other asset classes, but they've got the wherewithal to get off their butts and get out there and do something for themselves. And that's another thing which I love about property.
Yep, that's even the property itself is diverse in so many ways and with so many people and so many ways that you can make money and through it. So just moving forward, the Property Investor magazine itself. A lot of listeners here, remarkably enough, won't know what it is.
We better fix that.
We better fix that, and I get every month, and it's just a wealth of knowledge every month. So tell us what it is and what your goals are for it.
The New Zealand Property Investor magazine is, we set it up, it must be 8 or 9 years ago now, and it partly came about through an approach from the New Zealand Property Investors Federation. They saw what we did as successful publishers, and they wanted a magazine which they could provide to their members, and that's where the genesis of it came from. Our mission with the magazine is actually quite simple. It's about getting out there and showing property investors what's going on and using it as it's sort of like an educational tool where they can learn more about property, they can see what other people are doing, and at the end of the day, our bottom line is that every time you pick up a copy of the Property Investor magazine, you'll find something in there which will help you become a more successful property investor. And when you think about it, subscriptions, less than $100 a year, and we can pretty much guarantee that you'll find things in the magazine which will help you be a better investor and will actually, make that subscription, absolutely worthwhile. And, if people worry about that, they can also, as a property investor, it's a tax deductible expense anyway.
It always helps people.
So it's very much, and in terms of the content of the magazine, we try to get a good balance between news and what's happening and covering some of the current issues. And this year in particular with an election, there's a huge number of issues going on out there. We also try to put in their case studies of successful investors where they talk about their stories and other readers can learn from that. We run I guess we call it, the technical content, and that's a bunch of columns from people like Mark Withers, who's an accountant, and Tony Alexander at the BNZ, where they're talking about more technical issues which help property investors. And one of the ones which is particularly popular is some of the case studies we have around tenancy disputes, whether it's from the tenant or the landlord side. That's gold, that material, and it's really useful. And we also run a comprehensive stats section in there with the house prices and all the rental stats, and we know a lot of readers use that to check that their rents are, what they're charging in their rents is a market rent, and they're actually getting enough for their properties. The magazine comes out 12 times a year, so it basically comes out the first Monday of every month. Hopefully subscribers, if NZ Post is doing their job, they get it a couple of days beforehand, but unfortunately we can't guarantee NZ Post's performance these days.
Yeah, I've noticed it's come out a couple of days couple of times in the shops before I get it, but that's okay, I'll let you off the hook.
We work pretty hard on that one, but I must admit, and it's probably worth making the point because some of the readers have noted it with us as well. That does happen. It's all come about because NZ Post has actually changed the way it does its deliveries, and we've tried really hard to get the process a bit further ahead, and we're getting there, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my highlights of the month. I'm not an avid reader a lot of the time because I don't get the time, but there's one magazine I really enjoy. I sit down and, as I said, it keeps investors current. You get your stock standard people, like you said, Mark Withers or whoever it might be, commenting, and it's big names. You have the great stories you said from the investors who have done. You learn from other people's stories, and one of the things I always learned when I started, and it's usually carried on this way, you learn from other people's mistakes, and that's where the magazine is just a wealth of knowledge, and the thing that comes out every month is just it's a great tool.
That whole collegiality amongst property investors is quite an interesting point, and I'd put in a little plug here for your local property investor associations. Anyone who actually is thinking about being a property investor or is already a property investor, they should really seriously think about joining their local PIA, as we call it. It's an opportunity every month to get together with people who are in property, and you can talk about what's happening in your local market and share each other's stories. And I found that property investors are actually they're really willing to actually share their experiences with their colleagues and their peers, and that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I can't emphasise that enough, and total agreement with that. That's where we started our podcast series. We got Andrew King from the Property Investor Federation just to kick it into touch, or to start the thing off, because as far as I was concerned, a lot of people still don't know about the Federation. They don't know about the magazine, but this is where the wealth of knowledge starts. If you're interested in investing, there's always someone that's going to help you out, and they're more than happy to share their successes and their failures, which just gets someone moving on.
Oh, absolutely, and we're looking at doing some other stuff around that, and in terms of through our landlords.co.nz website is starting to run sort of little chat sessions with people, and that's something we'd like to look at doing later in this year, which should also be quite interesting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to move on to. That the magazine has a certain link into obviously a bit more than even I know of, but a few obvious areas, and ones with the Property Investors Federation that we've touched about, in the landlords.co.nz website. Those who don't know that, there's a website that has a wealth of information. His properties to sell, an update of mortgage rates, and again up-to-date stories from different people. So from you, how does that all interlink with each other? And tell us about that.
So what we do is we actually started off as digital publishers in the online space, and while everyone else was old-fashioned in print and trying to go online, we actually did it backwards. We did it online first, and then we started printing magazines. Our strategy as a publisher is that each of our magazines has a website associated to it, but they actually run under different brand names, and that's partly because they are a little bit separate. So the magazines are running the in-depth background material and giving you the good, strong features, and they're also, people actually still love magazines despite what you hear about the online world. People actually like to sit down, with their magazine, in the comfort of their own living room or in their lounge or wherever, and actually have that, I guess it's a tactile experience of enjoying the magazine. And we feel we can deliver, bigger, longer, more in-depth content to our readers, through a print publication. But there's a whole nother world out there who want to consume a lot of media in a digital format, and that's much more shorter, sharper, news-focused stories and news, and so we deliver that through our websites. And while Landlords is the official website of the New Zealand Property Investor magazine, we do run them as two separate entities. And so Landlords has, in that section, we run all, it's basically updated every day with news which is relevant to property investors. We run through one of our other sites where we collect all the home loan data. We run very comprehensive numbers around home loans and what's happening in that space. We run sections in there which have got a lot of the data from DBH around rentals, and also from the Real Estate Institute, where you can actually go in and you can go into Blenheim, for instance, and you could do a graph over the last 5 years of what house prices and rents in various suburbs within Blenheim have done, and you can actually graph them all, and you can play around with those, and it's all quite interactive. And we also have another section in there where people can actually ask questions of our experts, and that might be around tenancy issues, it might be around tax or lending or whatever. So there's quite a bit of interactivity in the site, but it is separate to the magazine. But at the end of the day, we find it comes back to that whole concept that a lot of your personal finance things are interrelated. So while we have the different sites and magazines, they all have linkages into each other one way or another.
Yeah, great business decision, having both the digital and the print one covered, done very well, and that's good. In fact, just on you mentioned one thing there. You can ask questions online about the like the tenant issues and stuff you end up seeing in the magazine. Is that actually? I've always wondered, is that where the articles you put in the magazine come from?
Article ideas is always we're always looking for ideas. I mean, a lot of them. Some of them will come out of the questions which people are asking. We can also see through the site, what are the topics people are really interested in, and various things like tax and stuff regularly come up. But in terms of ideas around our features in the magazines. A lot of them come from, the team here sitting down and talking about what they're seeing and what they think the issues are. And that's all built up out of our relationships with people in the property investing world, going out to PIA meetings and listening to what people are talking about. But also, we always seek feedback from readers. So like if someone has an idea of a story that they'd like us to write about, they should either flick us an email or give us a call and say, hey, we've got this issue going on at the moment. We think it's really important that other investors know about it. Or they might come along and say, hey, I'm a really successful investor. I've got this really good strategy. Do you want to use us as one of your profiles in the magazine? So, we're always seeking feedback from readers. And so if anyone does have any ideas, I'd, put the invitation out there to make contact with me.
So you've got the Property Investor magazine and Landlords and the links to the PIA, or PIF as it's now called. So what other magazines and websites does that lead on that you're involved with? I know Good For Toons, which is obviously one probably a lot of New Zealanders will look at every day with.
Yeah, I'll come to Good For Toons in a minute. One of the other sites which is really tied in for property investors is mortgagerates.co.nz. What the approach we took with our web publishing is that instead of having one big site with everything in there, we'd actually build a bunch of specialist websites. And so if you wanted to know about home loans, for instance, you just go to mortgagerates.co.nz, and the whole site is totally dedicated to home loans. And in there, you can actually sort interest rate, home loan rates from highest to lowest, etc. You can do graphs of what rates they've been doing, and there's a lot of expert commentary and information to actually help people. We do the same thing in the deposit taking space with another site called depositrates.co.nz, which is very much focused around term deposits and those sorts of investments. Not as big as the mortgage rate side, and with where TD rates and stuff are at the moment, it's all reasonably quiet. Our other big site is goodreturns.co.nz, and Good Returns is a fascinating story because it's probably, we think it was probably the second website which was built in news website built in New Zealand. There was one which came before that, and that was actually a computer website. Good Returns came about. My background was as a business journalist. I used to work for the Dominion out of their Auckland office, and I used to write a personal finance column for them. I was lured down to Rotorua, where we now live, and basically worked as a freelancer. And one of my big gigs back in those days, and this was in the 1990s, was to write for an Australian financial planning magazine called Money Management. Then one day around January 1995, I think it was, the business got sold, and the new owners rang up and said, we're no longer doing the New Zealand content in the magazine. And so suddenly, over half of my revenue disappeared overnight. My wife was just going on to maternity leave, and we were about to have our first of three sons, and I'm sitting there going, what do I do? and funnily enough, I'd come across this thing called the internet, and this is back in 1995, and I came across it, and because I was actually studying a horticulture degree at Massey University, and they were trialing this thing called email, and I'd sort of come across this internet thing, and I thought, this is quite interesting, and I discovered these websites, and so I said, okay, what we'll do is we'll take this concept of money management and the content we were producing, but actually put it onto a website in New Zealand, for financial planners and investment advisors in New Zealand. We sat down and thought, well, what's a good name for it? And we said, okay, well, investors, what do they want from their investments? They want good returns. What do our readers want? They want good returns. And what do we want as business owners? We want good returns as well. And so instead of having a name like Money Magazine or something boring like that, we picked on this Good Returns domain name, and we built this website, and we went out there and we started talking to people about, the internet, and people just looked at us, and I remember people just said, "Oh, that will never work." And,
those days, yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time educating the financial services industry about the internet, and Good Returns was actually, I believe, quite instrumental in getting a lot of that industry online, because we were producing good news and they wanted to read it. And it was actually a way of tying together a whole bunch of people across the country into a group, which doesn't really happen, with a newspaper like we were doing previously. And so that's how Good Returns started. We had, I think from memory, three companies came on board as our original advertisers, which was enough to make it profitable from day one. Good Returns has remained, profitable, and it's been a really successful business in terms of that audience. And, I guess in some ways it is our flagship, because it is the oldest and the longest running. I mean, the Property Investor magazine is clearly much bigger than Good Returns these days, but Good Returns has got a very special place in both our hearts, but also in the publishing world, and also in the internet, and has a very strong and loyal following. I mean, many of our readers, when they get to work, the first thing they do is they go to Good Returns to see what's been happening in their industry. So it's been really successful, and we continue to develop the site and add pieces to it.
Yeah, that's a great wee story there. 1995, yeah, it's coming up the 20th anniversary soon. I imagine that'll be a
bit of a party.
A bit of a party, or a nice milestone personally for you. In fact, I was overseas myself in late 93 in Africa, and I've worked with some Americans, and I remember this thing Windows coming along, and they were trying it out and seeing how it was going, and it was going, okay, this looks interesting. We'll see where that goes. So well done on being instigator on actually getting that going in New Zealand.
Yeah, look, it's been fascinating, and we're coming up to 20 years with Good Returns. I mean, the Property magazine, a little while back did its 100th issue. We're up to 100, and June is 127. And of our other two magazines, the New Zealand Mortgage Mag and Asset, they both, recently did their 10-year anniversaries and are getting into their 12th year now. So we've actually been right through the cycle of the investment cycle in the market, and that's been quite a challenging time.
Absolutely. The Good Returns site, and I'm just actually having a look at it while we're talking here, in fact, even though I've said all get near a computer. So how do you think that helped? Obviously, there's a wealth of information there for anyone in business, to be fair. How do you think that would help the newer investor? Why should they jump on and have a look at the Good Returns?
Good Returns has a lot of interesting stuff around what's happening in that wider financial services market, if you like, and there's a lot of regulatory issues in particular which we do touch on. If you come back to sort of what my philosophy is around both business and personal finances, is you do have to have diversification in what you do. So while a lot of property investors only want to own property, I'd sort of encourage them to actually think about things like shares and KiwiSaver and those sorts of things as well. But we also run quite a lot of news around insurance and what's happening in that sector. So it's just got a good level of information about personal finance matters.
Yeah, but one of the important things is if you're investing and you're treating it seriously as a business, keep current, see what happens, and whether it's landlords or Good Returns, it's daily updates of real information from real people with the current real rates. So when you go and have a meeting with someone that day, what where things are as of today, not 2 months ago or 3 months ago.
Yeah, and with a lot of the sites we've been working on, we haven't quite got there yet with Good Returns, but a lot of the sites like mortgage rates and landlords, we're developing so they are in what's known as a responsive website design. So, whether you're on your tablet, your iPod or your iPad, or whether you're on your mobile phone, the sites will display well there now. mortgage rates is just moving into this phase at the moment. We haven't quite tackled how to display a big rates table on a little telephone screen at the moment, but that's one of this week's challenges.
Nice to know you're still working through those issues.
Oh, look, that's one of the stark contrasts between publishing and print and publishing in the digital world. Print's quite interesting because you set a strategy, you design a magazine, and you have a really good process around your content and how you put it together each issue, and probably each year you go and revisit it. In the digital world, it's so dynamic these days that it's nearly like you have to write a new business plan every month or every week. There's so much change going on with whether it's, social media or whether it's, mobile devices. And that is the big trend at the moment, that, people used to only access their websites on their desktop computers. Now there's a huge amount of traffic which comes into sites which are through mobile devices. And so for us as a publisher, we have to sort of sit there and say, gosh, how do we redesign what we're doing and repackage what we're doing? So someone sitting there, they might be on the train going to work, or sitting in the airport waiting for a plane, or just at home. How do we display that information so it's user friendly to them? And it's a massive challenge, but it's a fun challenge as well, and that's one we enjoy. And then you start to throw in things like video. Where does that fit in? The podcast you're doing is another fascinating example of how delivery of information is changing. So those are the challenges we face nearly daily around what we do. But we're lucky we've got some really good people who do web development for us who help. And we've always got ideas, and it's sometimes it's like, if someone says, "Oh, can you do this?" Our answer, "Oh, we can do anything. We just got to sit down and we'll try and find a solution." And that's very much a core sort of philosophy in terms of what we do around developing our web properties as they're known these days. So no, it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun, and it is an ongoing thing. As you said, if you have any digital or a website yourself, it changes. The day you put it on, it's old. How it's done, and you do it to stay ahead of the game is one thing we've sort of dealt with too. The iPads and iPhones and all those sources of technology these days. We have to stay with it. It has to look good on it, or people will just go off you. And I know you're always trying to stay one step ahead of the game, and it's a hard thing to do, but it's important to keep going, and that's why I think you've got so many people actually to deal with the websites and that you have.
Well, look, again, it's also really interesting to get feedback from readers in terms of what they want, in terms of how they want information delivered to them. One of the other challenges is, do you go and build apps these days? That's a debate we regularly have within the business. And social media is the other big change. I mean, we do run a Facebook page for the Property Investor magazine where we got close to 2,000 people on that site at the moment. It's a good way to keep people up to date with what's happening and hear other people's stories. So, we continue to learn about Facebook, like everyone. Oh, excuse me. Like everyone does, yeah.
We will leave part one there, and next week's podcast will conclude this fascinating interview with a real knowledgeable man. If you enjoyed the show, we would love it if you go to iTunes and put your honest review in the customer review area. Have an awesome day.